Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Nigerian and international organizations raises concern over the menace of irregular migration. Russia announces the expulsion of a number of German diplomats in a tit-for-tat move. China and the Philippines pledges to work together to resolve differences in the South China Sea. My name is Evelyn Ohiola. Some local and international organizations have raised concerns over the menace of human trafficking and the plight of refugees across the globe, saying there is need for concerted efforts by all to check the growing trend. The concerned organizations include the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, and the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, among others. They made the call in Ijebode, Ogun State, during the premiere of a film, Dangerous Hope, which seeks to enlighten and sensitize vulnerable and other people of concern to the dangers of irregular migration, calling for an attitudinal change, increased knowledge and awareness for potential traffickers, the sort of necessary tools and assistance that could help survivors reclaim their lives. They argued that the need to fight the growing trends in human trafficking is a task that must be done by all. Outside Nigeria, the Sudanese army says it was coordinating efforts to evacuate diplomats from the United States, Britain, China, and France out of the country on military aeroplanes as fighting persisted in the capital, including its main airport. The military said Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan had spoken to leaders of the various countries requesting safe evacuations of their citizens and diplomats from Sudan. The main international airport near the center of the capital has been the target of heavy shelling as the paramilitary group known as the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, has tried to take control of the complex, complicating evacuation plans. General Burhan said some diplomats from Saudi Arabia had already been evacuated from the country's main seaport on the Red Sea and airlifted back to the kingdom. In the United Kingdom, a serving member of the British Armed Forces has been charged with offences under the Official Secrets Act. Thomas Newsome was charged yesterday with offences contrary to Section 2 and Section 8 of the Official Secrets Act 1989. Prosecutors alleged he made a damaging disclosure of information relating to defense on 17th of April. The charges follow an investigation by the Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Command. Mr. Newsome was remanded in custody and was to appear at the Westminster Magistrates Court today. The Met said he was initially arrested on Tuesday and detained under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984. A Ministry of Defense spokesperson confirmed the arrest, but however refused to comment further, stating that the matter is the subject of an ongoing investigation. In the meantime, the former Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab has accused activist civil servants of trying to block the work of government after his dramatic resignation over bullying claims. An inquiry found he was intimidating and aggressive towards officials. Mr. Raab told newsmen he was sorry if he upset anyone, but that's not bullying. He said there was a risk of very small minority of officials with a passive-aggressive culture were trying to block reforms they did not like. In his first interview since stepping down, Mr. Raab said the only complaints upheld against him were a handful of very senior officials out of hundreds of civil servants he had dealt with.
Well, there was certainly some coordination. One of the complaints was struck out because they'd written it together. Look, put it this way. These claims, some of them were 4.5 years old. Another one was 2.5 years old. The vast majority were 8 months old. They were all submitted on the same day, which is the 15th of November. I think a few came just a little bit later. That can't be coincidental. But I only know what I know. And I also know that I was warned by a very senior member of the government, a senior civil servant, that there are increasingly activist civil servants mobilised by the FDA union who are looking to target ministers. But all I know is that I think the bar has been so lowered now that the government we've got, and I'm a huge fan and supporter of the Prime Minister, is going to struggle to drive forward the changes we need. There'll be a chilling effect, a paralysing effect on ministers. I'm already, my phone is lit up by ministers now very concerned that they could be accused of these things for behaviour that in most walks of life would be regarded as important managerial scrutiny. And I think that must be wrong.
Staying with the UK, the leader of Royal College of Nursing, Pat Cullen, says the Health Secretary's legal action against the nursing union strike is cruel and unacceptable. Ms. Cullen, in a news chat, said members believe the government is punishing nurses for its pay offer. Health Secretary Steve Barclay is to challenge whether the RCN has a mandate for its 48-hour walkout on 30th of April. Ms. Cullen said that if the court found against the union, it would never do anything illegal. Mr. Barclay's decision to take legal action follows a request from hospital bosses. The RCN has rejected a government pay offer for England of a 5% pay rise for 2023 and 2024 and a one-off payment of at least €1,655 to top up last year's salary, depending on staff grade.
It's not planned to midnight on the 2nd of May. And we can split hairs. The Secretary of State can spend his time splitting hairs with the 300,000 nurses that have participated in this ballot. He can split hairs about what does 6 months mean and the definition of a 6 months, instead of getting into a negotiating room with ourselves and trying to work this out for the people of England, which deserve better, and our nurses. But no, what's he doing? He's dragging our nursing staff through a courtroom. And I find this not just cruel, but totally unacceptable.
Meanwhile, Germany's Verdi union has called for a one-day strike of air security staff at Berlin airport on Monday as part of an ongoing wage dispute. The union, in a statement today, said the walkout will start at 3:30 a.m. local time on Monday and end at midnight. Germany, Europe's biggest economy, has experienced some of its most destructive strikes in decades this year, as unions press for higher pay to offset the surging cost of living. The planned action follows walkouts at 4 other German airports on Thursday and Friday, which led to the cancellation of more than 700 departures flights. The union has been negotiating with the Aviation Security Association to push for pay increases for night, weekend, and public holiday shifts. And to the Russia-Ukraine war, Russian Foreign Ministry says Moscow has responded in kind to mass expulsion of its diplomats from Germany. The ministry condemns the actions of Germany, which it said continues to defiantly destroy the entire array of Russian-German relations. The ministry stated as a reaction to the actions of Berlin, Moscow has decided to mirror the expulsion of German diplomats from Russia, as well as to significantly limit the maximum number of employees of the German diplomatic missions. It, however, did not reveal the number of diplomats involved. Relations between Moscow and Berlin, which used to be the biggest buyer of Russian oil and gas, have frayed since Russia sent troops into Ukraine in February 2022. A first batch of Russian fertilizer, which Latvia seized last year, has been shipped to Kenya by the United Nations World Food Programme. Russia cited the seizure as a key stumbling block to its continued participation in a Black Sea grains deal that allows Ukraine to export grains. According to the Latvia's foreign ministry, a vessel left the port of Riga yesterday with part of the 200,000 tons of seized fertilizer. Ministry spokesperson in a statement today said several more vessels are due to transport the rest of the fertilizer, which was seized in March 2022. Russia has indicated that it will not allow the Black Sea export deal, which was brokered by the UN and Turkey in July 2022, to continue beyond May 18th. because a list of demands to facilitate its own grain and fertilizer exports have not been met. In another development, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban has cast doubt on Ukraine's long-held aspiration to join NATO. His intervention came after the bloc Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg yesterday said all NATO allies have agreed that Ukraine will become a member of the alliance. Mr. Stoltenberg has consistently said Kyiv will join NATO in the medium term once the Russia invasion is over. But Mr. Orban was quick to express his surprise at the latest claim in a one-word tweet yesterday afternoon. The Hungarian Prime Minister quizzed what while reacting to an article on Mr. Stoltenberg's latest comments. NATO is a military alliance of 31 countries, mainly in Europe, but also includes the US and Canada. Hungary, like all members, can veto new members joining. Elsewhere in Europe, Spanish emergency services have said 2 men died and 10 others were injured after a fire at a restaurant in the Spanish capital, Madrid. It's disclosed that the blaze started late last night at Burro Canaglia Bar and Resto, an Italian restaurant in the central neighborhood of Salamanca. According to eyewitnesses, the fire started after a waiter was flambing a dish and the flames set fire to the ceiling and walls. Emergency services said diners struggled to flee as the blaze started near the main exit. Spanish police said it was investigating the cause of the fire. You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We will be right back after this break.
Mao Zedong at birth, but globally known as Mao Zedong, he was a Chinese revolutionary and founder, People's Republic of China, which he led as chairman of the Chinese Communist Party from 1949 until his death in 1976. He was a communist who believed in the attainment of power by the instrumentality of gun. His wise saying, "Political power grows out of the barrel of gun," formed the major plank of his revolutionary struggle for the control of China. In the long span of his leadership and political power, Mao Zedong relentlessly entrenched the communist philosophy in China, which emphasized the revolutionary struggle of the vast majority of people against the exploiting class and their state structures. The communist leaders defined the class struggle as people's war. Mao Zedong was a story of grass to grace, having risen from peasantry to preeminent status as China's most respected leader. Western Spring Television identifies Mao Zedong as a major character in history. Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905, Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker, and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. First television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Western Spring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo as a major character in history.
Back in Asia, the Philippines and China have pledged to work together to resolve their maritime differences in the South China Sea, where the two have been competing claims and to deepen bilateral ties. This followed today's talks between the country's foreign ministers, marking the latest in a series of high-level meetings of the Philippines with leaders of the United States and China as the two superpowers battle for strategic advantage in the Indo-Pacific. Philippines Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo said Manila's relations with Beijing are more than just their differences over the South China Sea, as he began talks with the Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang in Manila. He, however, noted that these differences should not prevent them from seeking ways of managing them effectively. Since Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took office in June, the Philippines have filed dozens of diplomatic protests at the presence of Chinese fishing vessels and what it calls China's aggressive actions in the strategic waterway. Still in Asia, Japan has activated missile interceptors and is preparing to shoot down any fragments from a North Korean satellite that may fall on Japanese territory. Defense Minister Yasukazu Amada instructed troops to ready the PAC-3 surface-to-air missiles in southwestern Japan, including Okinawa and in areas believed to be under the flight path. According to a ministry statement today, he also ordered the deployment of destroyers equipped with SM-3 ship-to-air missiles to coastal waters. It noted that the military was making the necessary preparations because of the possibility of issuing an order to destroy ballistic missiles and other objects. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un had earlier in the week said its first military spy satellite will be launched on an unspecified date. Elsewhere, deep-sea explorers said they have located the wreck of a World War II Japanese transport ship and the SS Montevideo Maru, which was torpedoed off the Philippines in 1942, killing nearly 1,000 Australian prisoners of war on board. The ship was sunk on July 1st, 1942, en route from what is now Papua New Guinea to China's AEN by a United States submarine whose crew did not realize the ship carried prisoners of war. The location of the wreck had remained a mystery for more than 80 years. The maritime archaeology group Silent World Foundation, which organized the mission, said the vessel was found at a depth of more than 4 kilometers. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in a tweet said the extraordinary effort behind the discovery speaks for Australia's solemn national promise to always remember and honor those who served the country. Moving on, the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, says prisoners who have been held for years by the United States at the Guantanamo Bay detention facility are showing signs of accelerated aging. The ICRC's head of delegation for the U.S. and Canada, Patrick Hamilton, said this yesterday, noting that the physical and mental health needs are growing and becoming increasingly challenging for those still in prison at Guantanamo Bay. Mr. Hamilton, in a statement, called on the U.S. administration and Congress to work together to find adequate and sustainable solutions to address the issues. The Guantanamo prison camp in Cuba was established by U.S. Republican Party President George W. Bush in 2002 to house foreign suspects following the 2001 plane attacks on New York and the Pentagon, which killed some 3,000 people. The camp came to symbolize the brutality of the U.S.'s so-called war on terror because of harsh interrogation methods that critics have said amounted to torture. In the meantime, the U.S. Supreme Court has preserved access to a commonly used abortion pill, ruling the drug can remain available while a legal case continues. In a split decision, it also rejected restrictions on mifepristone implemented by a lower court, essentially maintaining the status quo. The future of the drug was called into question after a Texas judge sought to invalidate its long-standing approval. The case could have wide-ranging implications for abortion access. It comes after the Supreme Court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, overturned the Roe versus Wade in June last year, ending the nationwide guarantee to abortion and giving states the power to ban the procedure. In other news, the cost of ensuring exposure to United States sovereign debt rose to the highest level since 2011 yesterday, as markets jitters that the government could hit its debt ceiling sooner than expected. According to data from S&P Global Market Intelligence, spreads on U.S. 5-year credit default swaps widened to 51 basis points. The data showed that this was more than double the level they stood at the start of the year. According to analysts, the U.S. government's deadline to raise the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling could be sooner than expected, pulling forward the risk of a debt default that could have wide repercussions across the global financial markets. Meanwhile, Norway's $1.4 trillion sovereign wealth fund has said it will vote against a resolution calling on British oil major BP to adopt tougher greenhouse gas targets. While BP already aims to reduce emissions, the motion filed by activist group followed this ahead of an April 27 shareholder vote calls on the company to align with the Paris Climate Deal's goal to limit global warming. Norges Bank Investment Management, which operates the Norwegian fund, said last year that it plans to take a tougher line on companies that do not adopt credible climate plans. It did not give a reason for rejecting the motion, but the fund, one of the world's largest investors, has said it in the past that while it backs environmental, social and governance proposal put forward by activist group, it carefully judges each case on its merits. Now to some sports stories. The organizers of the Madrid Open have announced that world number 1 Novak Djokovic has pulled out of next week's event. No reason was being given for its withdrawal. However, in a statement, the tournament organizers wishes Djokovic a speedy recovery. The dead 5-year-old Serb has been troubled by a right elbow problem in recent weeks. Rafael Nadal has already withdrawn from the tournament, which starts on Tuesday, as he continues to struggle in his recovery from a hip injury. To football, Manchester United boss Erik ten Hag says he loves the all-or-nothing nature of cup football ahead of his side FA Cup semi-final tie. Ten Hag, speaking ahead of the game against Brighton, said he wants to see an instant response from his side. Man United were knocked out of the Europa League quarter-final after a damaging 3-0 defeat to Spanish side Sevilla.
Yeah, you ask a lot in one question, but yeah, of course I always think about, do I refresh because I have a squad, but also I know that we in this season, when we had bad defeats, bad performances, we bounced back, and I'm convinced and I have a strong belief we can do again, because we have the experience.
Briefly in entertainment, Barry Humphries, the comedian best known for his character Dame Edna Everage, who blossomed from an Australian suburban housewife into a self-described gigastar, is dead. The Sydney Morning Herald said Humphries died at St. Vincent's Hospital in Sydney, where he had been treated for various health issues. His family, in a statement quoted by the Australian media, said he was completely himself until the very end. The actor died at the age of 89. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese paid tribute to the actor in a tweet, calling him a great wit, satirist, writer, and an absolute one of a kind. Before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. Some local and international organizations have raised concerns over the menace of human trafficking and the plight of refugees across the globe, saying there is need for concerted efforts by all to check the growing trend. Russian Foreign Ministry says Moscow is responding in kind to mass expulsion of its diplomats from Germany. The Philippines and China pledged to work together to resolve their maritime differences in the South China Sea, where the two have competing claims, and to deepen bilateral ties. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. I am Evelyn Ohiola. Many thanks for your time.